Performance perfection, the importance of repetition. In real estate, the motto is location, location, location. In performance mastery, our motto is repetition, repetition, repetition. Retrieval practice or repetition essentially means self-testing to build and strengthen sets of neural links. You have two types of memory. One is long-term memory. That's the kind where the neural links stay put, and you can use ideas and skills months and even years later. The other is working memory. Working memory is the small amount of information that can be held in mind for a very short time and used in the execution of cognitive tasks. Don't think that just because you've practiced something, even if you've done well, that what you learned has made it to the long-term memory. Try playing it a week later and see what happens. The more you practice something, the more it becomes engraved into your long-term memory. Working memory is limited, although working memory capacity could improve through practice, suggesting that those with working memory problems could improve their capacities through repetition. Research has shown that repetition is vital to supporting motor learning, with some key considerations. Studies have shown that intensive, deliberate practice can alter the connectivity of the human brain. Repeated cognitive exercises lead to mastery. Intensive piano practice, for example, increases the white matter in the brain, according to the intensity of the practice. Little practice, little change. Lots of practice, lots of change in the brain. In essence, we are sculpting our brains. It's not muscle memory, it's brain memory. Repetition helps to improve speed, increase confidence, and strengthen the connections in the brain. Repeated practice of a motor task often induces or reinforces motor learning. However, repeated practice requires a lot of time to establish the motor learning, partially because we don't repeat extensively during each practice session. Even difficult passages get only a few half-hearted repeats each time, which means they might only get an accumulated amount of 10 to 15 repetitions per week, if that. If motor learning induced by repeated practice would be established more quickly, we would and could acquire the new motor skills earlier. So-called blocked practice, where we repeat the exact same movement, passage, etc. over and over, only teaches us how to do that fragment in one particular context, with no challenge to vary and adapt it. Blocked practice is characterized by a systematic order of skill execution and the consecutive execution of all trials of a given skill before the execution of the block of another one. For instance, A, another A, another A, then B, another B, etc. Still, it is a valuable tool. Just make sure you have an intention for every repeat. Where are the difficulties? Does one aspect have to be isolated and carefully repeated? Being aware of any body tenseness? Your body knows and shows when the brain is slightly overwhelmed. Don't learn tension. Repetition without repetition. Experts can not only produce a movement pattern to reliably and efficiently achieve a given task outcome, they also possess the ability to change that movement pattern to fit a new context. Nikolai Bernstein described this training process as repetition without repetition. In the first phase of motor learning, we repeat exactly, polishing and establishing the desired outcome. The second phase refers to the transformation of motions through practice. Though the approximate motions are repeated, their exact form changes. In this second phase of motor learning, we develop the ability to find effective motor solutions for a wide range of task conditions. The basic activity is repeated, but the actions change to suit the circumstances. The concept of repetition without repetition emphasizes that the goal of motor training is not the stable production of nearly identical neural stimuli, nor of nearly identical muscle forces, nor even of nearly identical joint motions. Rather, the goal of motor training is the consistently successful realization of a motor goal under conditions that are subject to unpredictable changes. Repetition creates and strengthens neural connections in the brain. We've established that. Hence, once the very core aspects of a movement are grasped, learners should be encouraged to repeat the movement in a variety of different contexts and situations. Seek plenty of opportunities, thousands and thousands, to practice a skill so that it becomes part of you. The more automatic a skill becomes, the less energy it takes for you to use that skill. And the more likely you will use it successfully in many different situations and environments.
The neurobiological explanation for learning a skill is you want to perform as many repetitions per unit time as you possibly can, at least when you're first trying to learn a skill. Why would I want to just repeat the same thing over and over again if I'm getting it wrong 90% of the time? And the reason is that the errors actually cue your nervous system to two things. One, to error correction, and the other is it opens the door or the window for neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the brain and nervous system's ability to change in response to experience, essentially to custom modify itself in order to perform anything better. When you make an error, it causes an activation of the brain areas that anchor your attention. Errors tell your nervous system that something needs to change. So if you are performing a task or a skill, like you're learning how to dance and you're stepping on the other person's toes, or you're fumbling, or you're not getting it right, those errors are opening the possibility for plasticity.
One of the things that characterizes outstanding performers is the ability to adapt to varying conditions. For example, in the late 1980s, it was assumed that Isaac Perlman attributed his superior intonation not to greater accuracy in placing his fingers, but to quicker corrections of position after placing them. Once, Perlman performed the Dvorak Violin Concerto with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. In addition to being deeply satisfying musically, his performance seemed perfectly in tune. Before playing an encore, he started to retune his violin, and the instrument was so out of tune that the audience burst into laughter. Clearly his excellent intonation during the concerto did not result from knowing exactly where his fingers should normally go and putting them in the same places that they had gone 10,000 times in the practice room. How can we structure practice so that we learn to use multiple movement solutions to achieve a given task outcome? Varied training is associated with greater cognitive engagement, aka more extended focus, concentration. A key aspect of this approach is to introduce variations during practice. We can vary the key, dynamics, intensity, tempo, rhythms, articulation, transposition, environmental conditions like humid or cold rooms, playing a concert piece without extensive warm-up, different instruments. This contextual variability is vital to deep learning, and while progress might be slower, the results are more robust. In normal practice, this repetition without repetition is only slightly true. In true lather, rinse, repeat fashion, we take a new practice method or context variable and repeat until the first signs of comfort appear. Things begin to get easy. Here it is very important to be aware of your focus. Once you zone out, you're wasting time. Interleaving. Instead of using a blocked practice schedule with practice completed on one task before moving on to the next task, an interleaved schedule can be used in which practice is frequently alternated between tasks. This frequent alternation involves more effortful processing in the brain, resulting in increased long-term learning. The high contextual interference that is associated with random practice and serial ABC practice promotes better learning than the low contextual interference.
My first meeting with Heifetz was when I was about 14 years old, and I was studying at a Juilliard school, and he visited the Juilliard school. I was studying with Ivan Galamia. Now, Heifetz was a great stickler for scales and exercises.
G flat in 10th.
He felt
Major.
that scales were an indicator of what kind of solid base you have when you're playing.
Could you play twice, you think? And an arpeggio with it?
You know, you don't just do a scale. You do a scale, you do the related arpeggios, you do it in double stops, you do it in octaves.
Fine. E flat minor in fingered octaves.
You do the whole routine, and I did it. And that really impressed him.
Developing your technical skills. In addition to studying appropriate repertoire for their levels, students should continue to develop technical skills to enhance their playing ability. Don't forget the basics. Customarily, these skills are developed through etudes, exercises, scales, arpeggios, cadences, etc. The etude is a great help for changing up practice to make use of repetition without exact repetition. The study, or etude in French, is a composition typically created to help overcome specific technical difficulties. An etude is a short piece that exploits one or two useful technical patterns and is the intermediate ground between the pure techniques such as scales, arpeggios, chords, and the repertoire. The etude is usually built upon a pattern or sub-skill that expands and repeats until it becomes easy and automatic. While in repertoire, patterns typically are changing too quickly to develop the same familiarity and coordination. Of course, some composers like Chopin created difficult etudes of sheer beauty meant for the concert hall. Scales, arpeggios, exercises, and studies can all be helpful, but must be executed with an understanding of why they matter and what is being developed. Approaches to using repetition in music practice. Tempo variation. Practice super slowly so you can play perfectly, even if you need to take the tiniest quantity of notes, perhaps only one. When learning or practicing entire pieces, start from an ultra-slow tempo, moving to a faster one metronome notch at a time. A variation of this is repeating each note in a short passage or scale a set number of times, say 4 times. After doing this, perhaps with metronome, subtract one of the repeats. Now you would play each note 3 times, then 2 times, and with the count back to 1, you are playing the passage as written. Rhythmic variation. Try the passage with a different rhythmic scheme. This will help break up the repetition and also expose your strengths and weaknesses. Use dotted figures so some notes are faster, which makes some awkward note transitions obvious and helps expose your weaknesses in your technique. It helps make your technique flexible and also helps you stop from going into automatic pilot, since you'll have to engage your brain in a fresh way with each group of repeats. Concentration on single parameters. This might be the most important of all the tips. Break down the passage into different elements to either improve them separately or gain awareness of the music or techniques involved. If there is more than one voice, you can play the voices separately, bass voice alone, melody alone, etc. You could play just the chords in a passage, turn the arpeggios into block chords, or reduce the melody to its basic harmony. Accent a designated finger every time you use it in a passage. Verbalize the finger number or the name of the note. Sorry, wind players. Only work on one parameter at a time and repeat 7 ±2 times. Target points. Sometimes we just blaze through a phrase and don't give each note much attention. By picking a note as a destination to end on, you can see if you can confidently reach that note with good technique, excellent intonation and tone, correct hand position, good musicality, and a confident sound. It could be each note in a passage, which builds security on every note, or maybe just the first note of the next phrase. This is especially good if you repeatedly miss the same note or forget an accidental. Write in the fingering or whatever you need to remember it the next time, because more than one time forgetting will affect your learning incredibly. Dynamics, articulations, techniques. You can also practice using varied dynamics or articulations. This will help build flexibility and interest into a passage, as well as developing ideas for musicality. Try a passage staccato with accents, or try using slurs or no slurs to see if there is a problem or benefit. Transpose the phrase. Note by note. Repetitive practice should also expand and contract in your practice session. Maybe you start with playing one note to the next, over and over, then add on one more note. Practice that until it's good. Practice this in tempo. Then the motif, then the phrase, then the whole section. Connect all your repetitions together to make sure there is confidence in each element. Don't forget the transitions between repeated sections. Take a break. If you have a difficult position change or jump, play up until that point. Stop for about a second until you have prepared yourself bodily and mentally for the new note or chord. Then execute the jump. With each repeat, you can shorten the pause. If repetition is boring, you are doing it wrong. Educational research has shown that the best way to learn is to struggle, which isn't so much fun, but very effective. Make yourself work on your weaknesses, even if, or especially if, the going is rough. To make real progress in your art, you have to learn to overcome your resistance. Remember, if it's easy, you're practicing the wrong thing.